Hey, welcome to another episode of Life on the
Hey, what's up,
Streets, the
guys?
greatest show on earth. And that was Kevin Baker interrupting me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's my first one.
It's his first one. All right, we got a great show today. Hey, usually we start off with a tomfoolery moment. We're not going to do that today. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
So, we have a great show today because we're going to talk about, actually, we're going to talk with these guys and we're going to break down the Charlie Kirk thing that you guys have been so passionate on. So, Tracy, Ertle, Kevin Baker, thanks for being here with us
Yes, sir.
again.
Well, thank you.
These are always such great times. Everybody knows Tom.
Yeah.
So, so let's just dive into this because I'm excited to kind of go here. Right. So let's let you guys lead off. So you guys there's been a topic that's been near and dear to your heart that you've been trying to bring to light and bring to some awareness here. Right. So let's start with that.
Hey, Kevin, you want to start off and don't bring up Tom wearing the medium t-shirt.
Again?
They're the only ones
Okay.
that fit, man.
All right. So
Yeah, they really don't.
it's really a tough way to start this because there's just so many avenues of approach, if you will. But I will say I'll just preface, where Tracy and I go with this thing of how we became. You say we're so passionate about it, which we are. How we become so passionate over it, and it started from day one. Afterwards, starting to try to evaluate what had happened, and as information comes trickling in over the couple days afterwards, going into a week, going into an interview from the Brian Harpole, and then a second interview, and
So let's clarify for our listeners what we're talking about.
sure.
We're talking about the whole Charlie Kirk assassination thing. So for those who aren't familiar with where we're going with this, so
That's what we're
continue. Go ahead.
Okay. See, if I hadn't interrupted you, you would have given a better introduction about why we were here.
All right.
And
I'm going to take
Brian is
accountability
actually in
for
charge
that.
of the security detail.
Yep. So
Go ahead, Ken.
Brian Harpole, I guess to bring everybody up, was the individual that was designated as the head of security for Charlie Kirk on the day of the assassination. And in addition, there was another individual there that was arguably, now that we've kind of seen how it's unfolded, was probably just as equally as important or higher up on the whole food chain, if you will, of the command structure. Tracy, what's his name again?
Dan Flood.
Dan Flood. So Dan Flood was there. So as soon as the information started trickling in, and especially after that first interview where he was on Sean Ryan, Brian Harpole was on Sean Ryan, so many things were said that just didn't make sense. I mean, we can, as we talk through it, I'm sure they'll come to light, but the list is very long. The thing that got us involved in trying to deep dive on this thing, besides the fact that it was, such a high profile assassination, and it was, televised, if you will, or it was being recorded, and so much information, so many viewpoints were there, was because, just like you guys are, we're heavy on social media and on different platforms. Looking at responses from individuals in the security or protection community, some of the things that were being said were just troubling, to say the least. Things that we were recognizing and going, well, the first thing that he said this, but I don't know why he even said that. That's anybody that's ever done protection before, that wouldn't be their viewpoint. And then as we would deep dive into all of the dissertation that was going on out there, we had to start deep diving on backgrounds. Because, if I go on LinkedIn as an example and I write an article or have something there and I link a couple people there and I put a video or I put a blog on there, then obviously you can click on me to find out who I am and, maybe get an overall view of what my mindset is or why I'm saying what I'm saying. And as we started looking at a lot of these individuals, the common denominators was arising that mostly everybody out there has no experience of protecting someone who actually potentially has a threat on them. So a lot of the stuff that was being said started to make sense. Now we started getting into arguments. I say not us personally, but watching arguments taking place between different platforms in security, whether it's organizations that are professional. Go ahead, Tracy. I know you want to jump in there.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say that it had different agendas they were trying to push.
Always
Yeah.
different agendas, trying to set up standards, so on and so forth. So now we start getting all well, this is the problem. This is what happened. And a lot of the things that were said were like, that's the farthest thing of one of the major contributors to how this happened. So now we have people that are recognized experts, if you will, I'll do my air quotes, here in the United States as protection specialists that teach courses certifying people, and they're actually have organizations where they have memberships and they're doing conferences, and they're saying things that are just totally it's very rudimentary, and it's very blindsided as to exactly what the issues are. And that's what made us dive deep and start exploring, going down this rabbit hole. It just led us to where we are today to talk about this.
Great. So
Yeah, I think part of it started. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, no,
The
no. I
part
think
of it
it's
started
important.
when Brian was being interviewed, and he said, "Oh, well, we have out to 30 meters," and then why did the police chief not ask questions about getting drone coverage and all these other things? Which, if you were actually the detail leader, those are all things that fall under you. And there's no 30 meters. You're in charge of all security and all protection and all encompassing, right? You're the top of the pyramid, if you will, on providing that.
So, so a little bit of background, because I really want to make this clear so that people who are watching this understand your perspectives, and as we chime in with what little we know about EP, but we will chime in from certain aspects that didn't make sense to us, coming from a law enforcement tactical perspective. Okay. But your backgrounds are in real world known threat protection, right? So kind of walk us through that so people understand that you're not just throwing out an opinion based on, as we've talked about, your perspectives from schools you've gone to. You guys are the real deal. So, Tracy, to start with you. I mean,
Yes. So I've done protection for many years, 30 something years, throughout the Balkans, doing protection for, European Union members. The president, when Javier Solana was the president of the European Union, ran his protection detail, right? So ran many details for many dignitaries throughout the Balkans. Wound up being the commander for the close protection unit in the Balkans, which was the largest protection unit in the world at the time. We had over 2,500 high threat moves per year, and that's talking about all the visiting dignitaries. Um, Jack Straw, when he was the defense manager for the UK, all these people, the president of the Philippines, the directorate for the police of the Philippines, all these people, the Security Council, when they traveled through the Balkans, we managed and protected all their details for them, right? So that detail, and then just prior to that, I was the close protection officer or the bodyguard for the very first president of Kosovo, right? When he was exiled to Italy, right? I brought him into the country until we get vetted local nationals trained to actually provide his protection. Um, so with that, that was the catalyst that built the worldwide protection course for the State Department. That was the initiator of that 14-day course, was what we did in the Balkans and how we built it. We actually we had a counter assault team. We conducted all the training. We had all the vehicles there. We did all that stuff inside the Balkans. And when the 9/11 happened, I think we had talked about this before. 2 weeks prior to that, Chris Dell, who was the chief of mission in Pristina, Kosovo, wound up getting a credible threat. And since they didn't have the assets, we provided protection for him until he could get a tier 1 asset in country to provide his protection. And matter of fact, Kevin was the team leader that actually took care of that embassy, and Chris Dell. So he was providing, contractor protection on a, mission / embassy long before any of these programs got initiated. And so 9/11 happened, which was the threat was bin Laden, because most people don't realize that Al Qaeda was operating in the Balkans, and the IRA and several other groups were operating in the Balkans, and that's who we were actually protecting people, whether it was judges doing the war crimes and things of that nature, trials, and then got into doing the programs for DynCorp and those things, where we wrote the programs for Karzai to Ambo detail for Afghanistan. Went to Iraq, ran the country program for DynCorp for doing protection for all the DoD personnel and things of that nature, and then went to work for another company teaching. Like I said, I've traveled to 43 countries. I think we did protection for the Crown Prince's detail. We did their training for the UAE, Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince. So we've run a lot of programs over the years, teaching or actually facilitating protection, right, for a multitude of different people. When I worked for one company, when John McCain and Barack Obama were running for presidents respectively, they actually came to us, and we actually provided their protection for them when they traveled to Iraq. So there's a lot of nuances there, but a lot of it fits into all these people had a true, and I'm gonna let Kevin jump in here. He's got a very lengthy background also in the protection side of stuff. So all these people had credible threats, right, of some form or fashion for them. They wouldn't have been given a detail without someone wanting to take their life in all these cases, right? They had a credible threat against them. So go
Not a
ahead, Kevin. I'm
hypothetical
sorry.
threat. We're talking a known credible
Yeah,
threat.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's the big theme of this whole get together here is theory, versus reality, actually real life. And I'll keep it brief, because Tracy alluded to a lot of the stuff that we were both involved in. Also, I was with, as Tracy said, in the Balkans, Tracy. However, before that, I worked a lot of domestic stuff, the EP and the celebrity. So I say all that because a lot of the people that we encounter, they think that if they talk with someone that has overseas experience, that they don't know how corporate life is. They don't know how working security domestically, all the parameters and all the things that you have that that you're not restricted with
facilitate.
overseas
Yeah.
world. Right.
Yeah.
So I've worked. When I got out of law enforcement, I went straight into working as a bodyguard for an NBA player, National Basketball Association.
That's what
It was probably the most well-known. Hey, don't be saying it. Probably the most well-known / controversial players at the time. I won't tell you what year it is, because then everybody will be able to figure that out. But I stayed working throughout the NBA on different individuals for a couple of years, about 2.5 years. In addition, I'll just cover the domestic part of it. I've worked for Sony Music individuals down in Miami. Tommy Mottola, I'm going to drop him. He's so out of the picture right now, I'm not really worried about it. But Tommy Mottola's Sony Music, a lot of the artists through there, because of having the relationship, with the corporate office. I've worked with probably one of the best known golfers that have been out there, working circuits almost through a whole year. I've worked through the domestic side, corporate side of an organization based out of New York, from a group of people that always have threats on them. And I worked for the national director for over 16 years for about 3 months every year as they traveled throughout southeastern United States. And the individuals from this organization always have threats on them, and they are legitimate threats. Actually, Tracy helped me out on those on a couple years with those also.
He was
On
high enough
the
to have Obama on the phone in the back seat.
Yeah. So we're very quick to come back when we hear a little bit of pushback from people, kind of saying, "Well, we're not covering ambassadors, so we can't do that." Hey, time out. We've worked on the people that you say that you work on now. So we have a very broad perspective of what we're talking about here, right? So when I say that just because I was a SWAT guy and I was assigned to protective detail and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, I'm talking from experience. All right.
Got
So,
that.
and we'll talk about that. That was a little segue. In the Balkans with Tracy, I've worked on a couple of ambassadors. I've been a part of details for 2 heads of state in Afghanistan and in Haiti. And Tracy and I have been teaching protection through several federal government programs, through State Department, whether it's Worldwide Protection, INL, the International Narcotics Law Enforcement, CivPol, Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. We've taught in every one of these, teaching protection to U.S. citizens, all the way to foreign dignitary protection details, so on and so forth. It's very broad brushed, but as Tracy said, you've been doing it 25, 30 years. You cover a lot of territory. The moral of that whole thing of us laying that background is that we know the difference between running details where there's theoretical threats, a maybe, or the what ifs, and the actual, we have intel and these people are coming after your guy or your gal. They're coming and this is how they're going to do it. Maybe we get that, maybe we don't, but they're legitimate threats. So every time you step outside the door every day, you're looking and preparing for that threat. So that's the moral of the whole background here that we're trying to bring. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to kind of give a little bit of a 30,000 foot view on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's important because I think that lends to your perspective, right? And I think that takes a lot of the argument sometimes or the debate out of stuff when somebody's saying, well, why is your opinion more valid than my opinion? Well, here's why, because we talked about this personally offline. We've talked about this, right? Experience.
Well, one thing I'll say on that is it really shouldn't take debate out of there. Debate, questioning, figuring out why we're doing what we need to debate. We need to talk about it. When you start shutting people down right from the get-go, and initially discrediting someone's background or their point of view, or saying that, well, you don't know what I'm dealing with over here because you did that. Man, you don't know what I've done.
Right.
So I have a perspective and I may be viewing things wrong. So if you're not willing to talk about it, and we'll cover that also, of us getting shut down on social media when we pose questions.
I think it's a good time to cover it right now.
Ask certain things and you get shadow banned on people's.
That's where I was going with that. Is it
right?
Just sort of,
they don't want to talk about it, or they try to take a moral high ground on you. Like saying you shouldn't be questioning it. It's like, hey, you shouldn't be questioning whether there were any type of fraudulent things going on in Minneapolis. Yeah. Shame on you for questioning those things. Oh yeah, we'll bring you some current events in here too. You know what I mean? But that's what they shut you down because they probably deep down know they don't want to go down this rabbit hole because they may be questioning whether they are correct or not. We don't mind questioning ourselves whether we're correct or not.
Actually, we enjoy it because it gives us a chance to actually explain ourselves in greater detail. It's like teaching a class and no one has questions. That's two things have happened if no one has questions. One is you've covered it so thoroughly, right? They're so enamored with you, right? You've covered everything, which we know is not true. Or they don't know enough to ask a question. So you have to work it to get questions. So either way, you want questions, right? So you can actually talk in greater depth and detail. So when someone can accept that knowledge, whether they agree with it, that's something else. But accepting the information, right? You have to know it at what level you're interacting with so you can actually get that um, receiving mode,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And if someone and it goes both directions. Hey, we're willing to listen to your theory or your thought process, right? That once again, that gives us a chance to explain ourselves. We
Right.
don't mind at
You
all
may not
being
come to
questioned.
an agreement, but you're going
Right.
to walk away understanding each other's perspective, and that's the key.
Absolutely.
And to Tracy's point, talking about, teaching is that, and I'll just piggyback on that last part. And I'm listening to him, and I know exactly what he's saying because we talk about it all the time. But the spark it, if you don't spark something within whoever you're trying to teach something where they want to inquire into more, which generates that question, as Tracy's saying, then you haven't done your job, because you can't get up there and give a 1 hour class and 1 hour practical and cover everything about that block of instruction. It's just not going to happen. So if no one, to Tracy's point, if no one has questions, they want to, they want to challenge you on some things, then you really didn't deliver enough thought-provoking information for them to actually feel like they needed to get involved.
Absolutely.
And that,
Absolutely.
and that's
I
that's
agree.
that's a shame, because I think you see that in a lot of courses out there where we're not learning, we're memorizing and trying to regurgitate information and phrases, which
Yeah.
is gets everybody in trouble when you start doing that.
Well,
I
and
agree.
you could tell those folks because they can't read between the lines. Somebody asks you a question that is not directly about what you're talking about, indirectly, and they don't want to discuss it because they can't, because they're very scripted knowledge, right? Very linear thinking, right? So, that's I think that's important when you're learning from somebody or taking somebody's class. If you can't, and I truly believe that you should answer the best of your ability any of the things that a student has the ability to think that might be a possibility. Hey, my thing is this: you ask me a question. Hey, if we do this, we do this. If we don't have an answer, I feel that it's our job as educators, if you will, is to come up with some semblance of a solution. So if we can actually take you outside and let you work through that problem and give you some semblance of an answer before you leave class, you're going to be so much better off, right? And it's not just like, me giving you some made up answer. Hey, let's work through it. You're going to go
Right.
out there and do this for real. You have to have an idea, right, on if that's going to work or not, if it's a legitimate question or not. And us, the discussion is the same way, right? If we discuss something and you give me some theory, right? I'm like, well, you're gonna have to go in more detail because that, to me, I'm not visualizing it. Doesn't make sense. Please, you know, expound on
Elaborate.
that, right? And vice versa. I will expound on something if I'm not making sense to somebody, whether it's a whiteboard or a walkthrough or whatever it is, but let's get some kind of answer to your question or vice versa. That is the fairest thing that one adult can do for another.
Absolutely love that. So let's get into where we were going now. So we were talking about the interview and the questions that came up, and then you were how you got involved in this is you were looking at the debates that were starting to occur.
Yep.
All right.
So, Chris, if I can, I'll say this. So we'll pick it up from, where Tracy led off talking about the mindset of our concern is 30 meters out and in, right?
Mhm.
So that's the first red flag that comes up. Red flag comes up, you go 30 meters. 30, okay, so
Yeah,
so we're talking about that may be an assignment that you give someone, but that's not the overall concept of what this protective operation looks like. And him as so up to that point, we were led to believe that he was the detail leader. He was the head of security that's driving that train. Um, and of course, the obvious one that adds right to and gives you the ingredients of it is when he starts talking about anything beyond that is not our concern. We give that to somebody else. We did not have the rooftops. We did not discuss it. And then we start getting into, well, if I give him that assignment, do I have to go back? Do I have to question a grown ass man about his assignment? That red flag is so big and so wavering in the sky that you sit there and you go, wait, whoa, wait a minute, time out. There's something else going on here that's not a protection detail.
But
And that's why
hey,
when, go ahead.
Kevin, remember the second interview is when it all come unraveled. When you called me up and go, hey, did you just watch the second interview about the
Yes.
text message being a
Yep.
third party?
Yep.
So pick that up from there, and when it started
Yeah,
unraveling.
that's interesting because I want to hit on that with you. So go ahead.
So we talked about it earlier with Tracy mentioned Dan Flood. So Dan Flood was, if we're looking at that a traditional protection detail, you might have a team lead, shift lead, whatever you want to call it, depending on what system you're under. You got a team lead, and then you always have someone that is the hands-on, close-in protection, or he's the close protection officer, the bodyguard, whatever he is. His main concern is being in that small little tight circle where the principal is. That job is so in depth as far as being a time and space issue that they're not concerned with anything else. They don't wrap themselves up in that. It's turned over to the choreographer, who is the team lead, who's actually overseeing all aspects so he can keep
Moving
his game.
parts.
He's calling
Yep.
plays. He's doing whatever. He's the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. And Tom, sorry, I know you're not familiar with football, but anyway. So
Soccer.
I had to get you
Soccer fan.
moving over there again. But anyway, so that's their job, and it's delineated like that for a reason, so everybody can concentrate on what their job is. Because in the heat of the moment, if the shit hits the fan, all those things have to be clicking. Nobody should be questioning what they're doing. So now we find out that during the second text, because the second interview, the first interview, it was inferred during the interview that the texting that was going on between the chief of police, who was the local resource, right, of the campus police, and whoever was doing the texting with, we were led to believe that that was Brian Harpole, the detail or head of security leader that was doing that. And we touched on it a little bit, and there's a whole separate subject of what it didn't look right in there. Tracy actually caught the nugget real quick as soon as it came out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in the second interview, come to find out that it wasn't Brian Harpole, who we thought was the team lead and who was driving the train, but it was Dan Flood, who is the bodyguard slash close protection officer in that formation, if you will, that system. Go ahead, Rick. You want to say something?
Yeah, which it's interesting because when I learned that, because when I was under the original impression that it was Harpole that was texting with the chief, right? I mean, a couple of questions from my perspective, from kind of where we come from, right? Is first of all, I have to question why is he texting with the chief of police? Okay, the chief of police who's completely probably most likely hands off on everything, right? Why are they not coordinating this with some type of tactical command within the police department? I mean, I don't understand this direct. And I mean, I'm not familiar with the police department down there at the University of Utah or where, but that seems to me like we've skipped a lot of levels here.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that raises some red flags for me.
Go ahead,
Right.
Tracy. I know you want to cover that.
I was going to say and I'm not familiar other than watching a couple of the videos is the fact that the chief of police was actually on the ground during the event. So I'm assuming that they're small enough that he had a hands-on. Either way, I do not, of course, technology nowadays. I don't agree with the text message thread at all. It to me, text in some situation like that is nothing more than a cover your butt type situation, right? It's the reality is, and you guys know this from your experience. There's no way that you guys would ever do an operation without some kind of briefing.
Well,
I,
we would have had we would have had, I mean, we would have had an overall briefing, and our
that's what I'm saying.
our
So
philosophy was everybody and anybody who's going to be involved in this operation is
That,
at
that's
that briefing. But we're going to have
that
we're going to have a
that.
command briefing, we're going to
Yep.
have team leader briefings, and then we're going to have an overall briefing,
And
right?
that's my point. So them not having one and then going back and forth on text, we know technology today. If you could text, you could do a Zoom call, right? If you're not going to be on the ground to actually meet this guy, and everybody that's going to be a participant, right, on their end can be involved in that. So we all know when we have look at each other and we talk about it, we all know what each other's responsibilities are going to be. That obviously never happened, right? So there was no clear delineation of tasks, right? And that came out when we were watching it. And I think the first interview we did with you guys, Kevin was talking about the police officer that was behind the tent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hey, he just showed up, so we used him, right? What does that tell you? All right, we didn't give out tasks. There's no
Yeah.
tasking, right? So and of course, we see later on that he's actually the only one that looks for a secondary threat
Grandma.
during the event, right? So he's got his pistol out looking for a secondary threat. Everybody else is actually, taking cover or tending to Mr. Kirk. So, for him to actually say, yeah, we were looking at for, we didn't know if there was more coming in. Well, you didn't react that way, right? And friggin', the video proves that. You can think it all you want, but the evidence is clear that that's not the reaction that happened. But I guess my point to most of this is the fact that there was no overall tasking because you didn't have a detailed lead, right? You didn't have a team lead that actually was a supervisory element that said, "Hey, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen." You can hear them talk about, "Hey, we had an app. Everybody got to put information into the app." My question would be, if you had this app, right? Did everybody that was actually going to participate, the guys there at the university, did they have access to that information, right? Who are you guys going to do? What are you guys going to do? What am I going to do? Am I just going to be in the crowd? What is my task? What is my response to X, Y, and Z? So none of that was actually covered for the simple fact on the discussions that they've had in the different interviews. They haven't talked about any of the task orders, right, or the tasking, and that 30-meter um, standoff, if you will, of what they were looking for. It's just like Kevin said, on one of our talks. He goes, "You're doing venue security." Dan Flood was the only individual that was actually providing a protective posture for Charlie. He had a one-man security detail, and the rest were venue security by their reaction.
Right, which changes the whole scenario. Um, but I want to go back for a second and kind of take it from our perspective. And Tom, and I want you to
Yeah,
jump in
sorry
on
about that.
this.
I didn't mean to get down the road too far.
No, no, no,
You're
you're
good.
fine. But it actually sets this up perfectly. So when we were talking about there was no clear delineation, there was no assignments, right? So people actually didn't understand what their role was. They didn't understand their areas of responsibility, and they
Right,
didn't understand the mission. Okay,
right.
so that right there, we've got a failure. I mean, it's going to fail. We know that,
Oh, yeah.
right? Even if it's a small failure. I mean, this was catastrophic, but it was already. I mean, it would have failed, but it would have been one of those no harm, no foul mentalities, and we move
Well,
on,
that
right?
that's that's kind of what Kevin was alluded to earlier, which is, hey, until the wheels come off the wagon, no one ever talks about it, right? Hey, we did that last week. Hey, we did. I mean, you heard them. Hey, we go to campus all the time. So if this is what you've been doing unhindered, then and nothing happens, then you think you're doing great,
Right.
right? I mean, that's where they're at.
So
So
the question that I would have, and I want to get your perspective on this, Tom, is because there was no briefings, okay? Clearly there was no briefings and so there was no command structure because I mean you would want to have it and you call it a team lead for, EP type stuff, but we call this a tactical command, okay? And the tactical command is not the guy with the boots on the ground who's trying to multitask and run things. This is somebody who's basically, as we call it, the 30,000 foot rule, right? They're up and they're overseeing everything and they're putting things in action, and they're coordinating things, and they're the ones facilitating the movement and the communication with everybody, right? And it's not just one guy. I mean, there's going to be a couple people. There's a one decision maker, and then there's people that puts those into action, right? Everybody has their assigned roles. That clearly didn't happen. So my question, and I'll throw this back to you for a second, Tom, is where was Overwatch on this? I mean, because I go back to that text, and the question is, hey, the chief says that there's access to the roof, right? Or
Right.
Flood says there's access to the roof, and the chief says, so you want access to the roof? That told me right there was never any discussion. Nobody sat down and actually come up with an operational plan here. Okay.
Right.
Nobody did a threat assessment. Where are my vulnerability points? Stuff like that, right? Why did I not have Overwatch? Now we talked about this with you don't have to have a sniper.
No.
Okay, I understand. I can put spotters up there with glass, and they're watching for threats. And I can have a uniformed officer up there. Doesn't have to have a rifle. We just got to have somebody who's securing a high ground, right? Secure it.
Right.
Make sure nobody's going up there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Kevin talked about the first time we talked was, hey, just having an observation post at a higher level, looking at anomalies, right? Things that are going on, and if you really look at it, I don't know if you guys visualize the stage looking into the crowd, but like I was telling Kevin, um, you know, the place, if you look at the if you're on the stage where Charlie Kirk was, and you look at about 1 to 1:30 on the clock level, 12 being straight out.
Mhm.
But if you look at 1:30, where there's a walkway that's above the ground level that has a multitude of people standing on it. If nothing else, why would you not have someone standing right there? Because to be honest with you, that is such a that would have been such a friggin' red flag for me, just having those people at that level, right? And so many people standing there. So with the text message and taking a step back, he got the security that he asked for, which was the one on the walkway above them. But see, they never, neither one of them addressed the very first one, right? Because they didn't know what they were asking. They didn't know what they wanted, and they didn't know what they were actually asking. He goes, "Hey, do you want access to the roof?" And he goes, "Yeah, and there's a walkway above us, or above the tent. We want somebody up there." Well, they wound up having somebody up there,
I got
right?
you.
On that,
I
yeah,
got
I
you
got
covered.
you. And they got that guy. But
What
see,
does
no
that
one ever
mean?
addressed the very first question, which was, roof access. So if you look at it from a perspective of not knowing what you're asking and not knowing what you're getting, that's exactly how that text played out. He asked for roof access, and then he goes, "Oh, so you want roof access?" And then he goes, "Yeah, there's a roof right above us, right? The tent." He goes, "Oh, I got you." So if that's your whole question, then you would think that's the roof he's talking about. He wants roof access,
Very
right?
ambiguous. What do you?
There's no clear interaction there.
No, there's not. And I think that the way this sounds to me is that this whole operation was just a clusterfuck from the get-go. And to the point that, like, just listening to what you guys are saying and kind of seeing the overall thing. And when I watched the interview, I watched the video of the actual shooting and stuff, and where the sniper shot from. Like, to me, there was no coordination between any of the security side, in my opinion, um with the university police department. And the reality is if what tells me, when you said the chief of police had boots on the ground there, that tells me that's probably like a six-man department where the
Very small.
chief actually, like, takes a shift and type of deal.
Mhm.
Right.
So that in and of itself is a problem, because then they're not recognizing their limitations, in which they probably should have got a hold of, what is it, Orem PD? That's the nearest
But
PD
but
with a
see,
SWAT team. and
but
start
see,
getting assets.
yeah, and that's the other side. See, it's not up to the chief, right? That's the whole part of this. As if you're in charge of a security detail, you know what your assets are because they're an accessory. If you know you're only going to get certain assets from them, they're a 6 or 12 man department, then you go, hey, chief, do you have the number to the XYZ? We'll use Orem. And I need to reach out to that chief and see if we can doggone add some other guys to you because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. See, that's part of that job, right?
Mhm.
It's nobody else's job. It's his job to realize what are my players? And if my players aren't up to speed, I need to get more players involved.
Right. But that's strategic thinking, right? So the problem that comes in here is who's doing that? Because nobody's doing that, right? And
Right. It
if
should
you,
have been Harpole. Right.
yeah, right. Okay. Yes. But I'll go back to this. It should have been several people. And this is what facilitates that conversation. Because if somebody came to me and said, hey, we want to use your team, right, to do this positions, my first question is going to be, okay, so what do we have going on? Is this an event? Is this a known threat, right? Is this an actual protection detail? What are my guys going to be doing? Are we vetting the information here? What is the known threat here? If I don't know who Charlie Kirk is, let's just say I don't, right? Am I being
Sure.
curious and saying, well, if you're coming to me, there's got to be something more to it than it's just an event, right? If you're coming to me. So what does that look like? And that should start raising some questions and some flags up where people should start becoming curious as to what do we have going on here?
Well, it could be just as simple as, hey, we're coming into town. We need a police presence, right? It could be that simple too, right? There
It
might
could
not be
be,
a known, yeah, but yeah, I understand your point of view.
but that question should be asked, right? Is this just a
Well,
simple event?
I guess my point is this is part of running a security detail. That's his job also is to go, hey, this is, hey, Rick, we're coming into town. Charlie Kirk, I don't know if you're familiar with him. If you're not, I'll send you a link, right? So you have some information. I've got 13 guys I'm usually working with. This is what our expectations are. How can you help us? We definitely need your help. How can you help us? That's how the conversation should start, something similar to that. So you can ask questions, right? Give you enough information, once
Right.
again, to ask me questions. Hey, well, has he had a threat in the past? Well, he has constant threats, him and his family, right? And these are the type of things that we usually do. This is what's happened in the past, a lot of information dump, you know, uh, no one is expected to be the receiver of a detail and asked to provide a protection, right, or some semblance thereof, without knowing exactly what's going on. You don't do people that way. That's why a professional, right, gives you enough information to have questions and not questions right now, right? Because you probably want to, as a chief or TAC team commander, you're going to go investigate on your own, and then you're going to call me back probably the next day or that later that night and go, hey man, I got like 15 questions I got for you. Hey, run them down,
Mhm.
and if I can't answer them, I'll find out, and then we'll get back to you. Right? That's as simple as it is. We're at least tracking on the right information.
Exactly. But it goes back to something that Tom said is recognizing your own capabilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, and what you are and are not capable of. And when I'm talking about on the police chief side, is had that conversation taken place, right? And he gotten that information, and had he been curious and started asking questions, the first thing that would have come to my mind if I were in that position, I would like to think my very first thought would be is, wow, you know what? You asked how I can help you, and I can probably give you some uniforms for out exterior, but I got some concerns here, and I think we need to include, what was it, Orem
PD, I think.
or
Or
Orem PD or Orem, whatever the
right.
larger, who has a tactic. Well, I think we need to have them in this conversation because I think we need to have a conversation. And
Right.
but that didn't occur. So that's a red flag for me.
But I think also all this all comes back to the whole cognitive bias, right? That all experience is not the same, right? So and we see it all the time, and we've heard it, I think probably 30 times with, and I hate to beat him up, and I don't mean to in an ugly way, and I'm not saying it that way, but when you tell me you have 14 years of police work, that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing here. So that experience, doggone, doesn't play out, right? Hey, I was a police officer for 14 years, right? See, that's part of that cognitive bias of
Yeah.
not recognizing, right, that not all experience transfers from one task to the other.
Mhm.
Because you have a lot of experience as a police officer doesn't mean that you have experience. It's a whole thing of, hey, because you can catch bad guys doesn't mean you can protect people from bad guys. They're two different things.
Mhm.
Well, they very much are. I can tell you. I mean, I make no bones about it. I am not a close protection guy. I'm not an
And
EP
I'm not
guy
trying to be
because that
ugly.
was
I'm
never
just saying
but
that's
that was
part of
never.
the
But
situation is these guys are thinking that because they have a certain level of experience of one thing that it transfers to other tasks, and it doesn't.
that's just not the real world. You know, that I couldn't do that with. It's that I can't speak intelligently to those roles because I've not done those roles. There's a presumption that I should be able to do those roles, but we had specific tasks when we did, presidents and stuff. We were always a tactical element on the outside. We weren't doing close protection. You'd be hard pressed to find any tactical unit that was doing close protection on those. Usually they had Secret Service or they had their own, you know what I mean? And we were,
Right.
as you put it, we were an asset, a resource for them. That's it.
Right.
So Rick, I
Yeah,
have a
but
question for you.
go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Kev.
Sorry. Yeah. I've been writing all my notes over here, listening to you guys talk. Um,
I didn't
how
even realize
many,
you were still on the call, but go ahead.
yeah, I didn't either. I thought I went to the bathroom and came back and my camera wasn't up. So how many police officers have done venue security?
Oh, lots. I mean, most
All of them.
officers do that as off duty. They
Mhm.
do that as an
So-
off duty assignment.
So I'm going to
Absolutely.
take you back. I think this was about 35 minutes ago. But anyway, so Tom said that nobody had assignments. That's not true. There were assignments given. It was assignments for the venue security. I
Yeah.
need these two guys up front by the gates. You guys are going to, when the person steps up to the microphone, you're going to give them the up and down. You're going to give them a look. They're going to stop here when they get through talking because they're going to be on the other side of the barrier. Now they're a threat. Then we're going to have a security guy who's going to make sure that he leaves that area. So those guys had assignments. There was a guy in the back. He had his assignment back there, and then the police officer showed up. My point to all that is those weren't the correct assignments, but they did have their assignments
True. That's
30 meters in. So those assignments were given, right? Now, the other part I wanted to bring up and listen to you guys talk was this was the big red flag for us for when he was speaking, and then all the dissertation that was going on talking about we can't afford snipers, not everybody can have this isn't an ambo detail, you got to have extra budget for that, whatever it is. If I'm coming in there and you guys are my static security, and I look and I say, where are areas of vulnerability? Well, we have this crowd up here. What else do we have? We don't like that high ground. So my first thing is we want to deny people access. Can we lock that down where there's no access? So deny,
absolutely.
right? We can't deny. They can still access that area. Then can we put a body there? Can we occupy that position? Well, we don't have enough people to do that, or for whatever reason, we can't occupy it. Then you got to go to the third one. Can we at least get eyes on that area? So if something does emerge, we can react to it and get our guy out of there. That's the basics of what we do. So when people come out of the woodwork and start talking about counter snipers and extra budgets and all this stuff, there was about 18 dudes there. Between the venue security team, I'm not going to say protection team anymore, between the venue security team and the off-duty officers, what was it, Tracy? Six to eight, somewhere
Six,
around
I think they said
there?
off-duty
Six.
police officers.
So that was just misappropriation. They thought they were appropriating correctly for venue security,
Yeah.
but that's how it worked out. You've got Dan Flood, who's the security for the organization. Here's how it normally goes, and this is how it unfolded. We're going to go to a speaking arrangement. He gets all the intel from their little intel unit at TPUSA. Hey, we've got this threat. We've got this. We've got all this information coming in. He gets the information. That's why he was texting with the chief of police. Now he hires venue security, which is Harpole and his guys. His main job is, depending on how big that crowd is, depends on how many people I bring for venue security. Because the biggest threat we have is those 3,000 people, 2,000 people, 5,000 people, fill in the blank, whatever it is, depending on where they're going.
Bomb rushed. Yeah.
Whatever is 30 meters within. So he hires them to come in for crowd control. Then when they get there, they say, Chief, head of security, depending on where the campus is and what's going on, they go, here's what we need from you. We've got 30 meters in. You've got everything outside of 30 meters. Any questions? That's how it goes. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
That's how it went all along. And that's how it went that day. That's it. When everything is laid out on the table, you can't look and think that it went any other way. Were there some questions? Yeah, there was questions. How about this roof over here? And I'm not going to go back and rehash all the stuff Tracy talked about who's driving that train and who's doing all that. But because there was no structure and it was just piecemealed, because it wasn't a protection detail, or to Tracy's point, it was a one-man protection detail. That's all it was, with hired traveling venue security. And we'll use whatever security, guard, campus police, campus security, whatever we can use once we get there, because we know that their job is not that important, because we know that if there is a threat, it's going to be within that 30 meters and it's going to be right there within the group of people that's there. So that was the faulty mindset right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So they could have had every threat imaginable, which they did, threatening him, his family. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to throw something on you. I'm going to throw blood on you. Whatever it is. They just didn't deem, as our buddy Mr. Schaefer said, we can go down that road, the previous detail leader, who's a former FBI agent, said in the post-assassination interview, when they wanted his opinion, he goes, no one in 1,000 years would have thought that would have been an issue, a sniper on a roof.
Unbelievable.
So, oh yeah, you want me to show you that video on Fox TV when he was being interviewed? There's your first problem. There's your first problem. You've got an agency who their primary task is investigations, and someone that's retired from that investigatory bureau gets in charge of a protection detail. And that is how the mentoring started, because they all worked under that agency until they all separated and went their separate ways, and ended up being in the structure that they ended up in. Yeah. All right, good. Thanks for your time and consideration.
It was all my pleasure.
So,
yeah, and see, that's part of that that bias that we talked about earlier with some of the federal agencies getting involved that don't do protection, but because they're retired from a federal agency, they have some form of credibility that they sell people on. Once again, sometimes people don't know what they're getting or what they're supposed to get, right? So the picking and the choosing, right, of the detail goes without a knowledge. It's not like people spend more time researching buying a certain car than they do getting a life or death situation, as in a protective detail, right? They're like, oh, this guy's retired from the FBI, he's got to be good, right? Whatever it is. I'm just saying there's a lot that goes into and we've talked with some Fortune 500 companies at the beginning of the year. I think February, was it February, Kevin? February, somewhere in there.
Yeah, early February.
Where we had talked to them because they were talking to us about how to select a detail. And that's one of the things that we had talked to them about, because if you've never had a detail, you don't know the questions to ask. So we gave them a laundry list and actually talked to them, and if they wanted us to help them with the interviews. And I don't remember if Kevin wound up helping them or not, but uh, it's those things that when you're doing when you're shopping for something, you need to make sure that you ask the right questions. And if you don't know what those questions are, obviously when Turning Point USA, right, when they decided to pick a company and they went with what was the name of that company? Was it Schaefer and Associates or something?
Yeah, the first one.
Whatever it
Yeah,
was. Yeah.
I think, yeah, Schaefer, I think it was.
So when we went with those guys, how do we know what the criteria was when we see that the end product is what it is right now? Right? It's not a protection detail at all.
Well, makes sense. Well, and it kind of comes back to, and it's a question that I ask it. It drives me crazy. Tom and I have talked about this, and I know you guys have talked about this, but this conflating the term EP with different types of training. Uh, Everybody's an EP specialist, and I see and I was talking to you guys offline, Tom and I, about this. That drives me crazy. As I see these companies that are offering, I mean, they're doing room entries and, and vehicle extractions and takedowns. And so how is that EP? I mean, how is that play into this? I mean, but those are the things that people see and they think, oh, high speed, low drag, these guys are good. Well, they're not good at what you're looking for, though. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kevin,
What do
you
you
want to
think
address
about
that?
that?
So, and we talked about it briefly before we even got on. I know where we're going with this. And I don't think it's so much when you're talking about dignitary protection or in law enforcement or SWAT guys on a dignitary team or whatever it is. It's probably more in the commercial side of the house. And you have two different, I don't want to say approaches, but you got two different schools that kind of base what they deem as important, which is typically based on what your experience is and where you think your lane is. So you got the Tackleberry school. You guys remember Tackleberry?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you got the Tackleberry school where everything is about being in position. It's about having a ballistic response. It's about those, and I'll do my air quote again, the hard skills part of it, right? You have all of that. Now there's a market for that. There's a market out there. It's an ugly market, but it's still a market. I think the key word is it's a market, which means that it's about making money. So it's that aspect of it. But on the flip side, which is still about making also, you've got the cubicle side of the house. I always refer to it as a cubicle. All my work is done in a cubicle on a computer, which means that if I can't find it on the net, then it's probably not going to happen. Which means the probabilities are very low that I didn't find the threat or find the source of where a potential adversary may come from, whatever it is. So on this far side over here in the cubicle, they deem that everything that they're doing is of importance, and it's more important than anything that the hard skills. I'll say the hard skills and the soft skill, right? Just keep it separated. Now the hard skills are just rah, rah, rah. We got to go through, 1,000 rounds at this course, whatever it is. And the sad reality is that if you're talking about protection, and a lot of people say, hey, if I got to draw my weapon, it was a failed mission, right? And that's great. That's great to think that way. But that's not reality. It's not reality when there's true threats, because you can plan for everything, cross all your T's, dot all your I's, but it may be something, it probably be something that you missed. And when it rears its ugly head, you better be ready for it. Right? They take that portion of it on the hard skills, and it's just, we're going to do, hey, our principal got taken. They're in that vehicle. They're being taken off. It was attempted kidnapping. Hey, we need to train vehicle takedowns. Now, what's the probability that will happen? How many times has that happened in the history of EP details when there's been a snatch and grab or there's been some attack on a principal? I asked that question. It's very rhetorical because it really doesn't matter. It gives us an opportunity to go do vehicle takedowns. We can do it from another vehicle. We can do it from a helicopter. Wouldn't that be even more fun? And I can actually charge more. I'm being a little cynical, but for obvious reasons. But just as irritating as that and frustrating is that other side of the house, which means you never really, if I have to leave this cubicle to go do a job somewhere and something happens, that was a major failure on the protection detail because it's all about intelligence gathering. And I'll throw it out to you guys because I thought about this when we were talking. It was like if I said, hey, look, we're going to go hit this house and we got 2 weeks to prepare for it. And you guys are going, oh man, what kind of intel do we have? Let's go in and start mapping this thing out, right? We're going to do some walkthroughs. We're going to do all this other shit. As opposed to something just happened, exigent circumstance, we got to go make an entry on this house. Can you guys still make an entry on that house without having 2 weeks of intel?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Damn right you can't, because you have the skill sets and you've trained it. Now, would you prefer having all that intel?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
course you will.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
But there's a balance here.
Of course.
Right?
Of course it is. And,
There-
and that's
there-
a
there's a
lot of what gets
balance.
missed. You guys go ahead and carry on for a second. I think I'm about to lose my battery. Let's figure it out. Oh, I got it. Never mind. Operator error.
No,
Was the ticker fluttering?
It's operator error. No. Actually, it doesn't help me because if I hit my life alert, it goes to Tracy. He's not going to be able to do anything.
you got to hit the
Yeah, at
little
least
button
I'm a
first, then it
witness, so I
says
got him on
okay to
camera.
shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but you're right.
But it is. It's very annoying
balance.
because you got two camps that are very
Don't do your hand
very
like that.
adamant that their way is the best way. And if you're spending too much time doing intel, we'll just do escort security like our SWAT teams that get a dignitary protection detail. We're just going to do escort security because if something happens, we are tactically proficient to be able to respond to it.
Right.
Right, you got that, and then you got the other ones that if there wasn't a threat made online, there's no threat out there. Those are two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, you're gonna have to repeat
That's
that
what you
because you
have.
were really garbled on
Yeah, you
that.
kind of garbled up a little bit, but
Yeah, those are the two ends of the spectrum. Those
yeah.
two, the ones that say that if I can't find it online, if the threat has not been announced in some type of platform or form on there, then there is no threat. You've got that portion. And then you got the other ones that want to pay no attention into intel gathering and doing proper, almost like doing a venue security, right? And we'll bring it back full circle to these guys because all they're doing is they're showing up saying, this is our threat. As long as we can contain and watch this group of 3,000 people, we're going to be okay. There's no other threat that can emerge that's going to be a challenge to us. Everything is right here. That's why all of our resources are here.
Right.
It's just like the ones that do escort security. As long as we can control this area right here, we're not worried about what's going on out there.
Mhm.
And that's the two ends that will get you in trouble when you get overly confident in one as opposed to the other.
Makes
Or
sense.
on either end.
Tracy, you look like you have something to say.
I was going to say, yeah, some of the congressmen that when they're visiting their home state, their location, they have they get SWAT teams or whatever type things protecting them, and it turns out a lot of times to be less than desired because once again that whole experience thing, they don't transfer and they don't ask for help. And you guys being longtime police officer, you know that this is one of the problems in police work, and that is, I will say this: it's usually budgeted, directed by budget. But I will say, hey, Tom, or hey, Rick, hey, you guys are going to go to this school, and then you're going to come back and teach everybody else.
Mhm.
And we know that doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
not well anyway. All right. So a lot of times, it becomes that way. And this is, and I used to do a lot of training for the special operations community. And a lot of those units they will look with inside themselves, right? I was a contract instructor. So after a while, they're like, all right, so, these other guys are retired from this unit. So we're going to bring them in and they're going to teach and, blah, blah, blah. It becomes very incestuous. We all know that at some point, right? Whether you're inside a unit or say you're being homeschooled, right? if you're being homeschooled, at some point, you're going to get to the level that you can't learn anymore from being at home. You have to go to an outside source. And when it becomes incestuous like that, right, the unit is only training guys that have been in the unit, right? There's no growth happening. None, right? And a lot of that happens when you send out one police officer, right? Or whatever, it could be any unit, and he comes back and trains everybody because he's going to put what he remembers and what he feels his
Senior point.
experience level, right,
Mhm.
to that group. They're never going to get the depth that the other person that they send him to gets. So they're really getting cheated. And the problem I see with that over time is Tom, Rick go, oh yeah, we had a guy that went to, Tracy Ertle's friggin' high speed shooting school, and they didn't, they came back and we did some of the stuff, but it wasn't that great. Well, that's not the true reflection of the training or the depth of knowledge that the first guy actually got.
Yeah,
Does
but that's
that
called
make
training
sense?
post office. That's
Yeah.
training
So
post office. That's how it
yeah.
gets diluted as it goes down the line.
Mhm. Yep.
Absolutely. And we see that in this world right now. The executive protection side or the dignitary protection side is, especially in the law enforcement guys, they want to send one guy, and then next thing you know, nobody else from that department comes, right, to the training because he's back there working with the training department trying to replicate the level of training without being able to fill in the voids or in between the lines of all the actual information.
Right. Right. I
And
mean,
They
so,
get
so,
cheated.
so think about this so I can actually put a face to all that you guys were talking about there is you guys go to, or you have a couple guys go to a Secret Service 3-day, 5-day course, whatever. They come in and they train up 5 guys or whatever it is. First off, you got to think, and this is, it's unfortunate to say, but I think if we actually evaluate it, we will know the Secret Service, when they look at threats and think about what they defend against, you got a couple different things are. Number one, what are their resources that they have available to them? Because that actually dictates how you run your program. How do you set up everything, your mission planning, everything, which obviously makes sense. Now, when they give you that training, a lot of times it's they have an ulterior motive, which means that we want to give you a crash course introductory into this style of protection because in the event we have to bring a principal here, we know that you guys have seen what we do, the basics anyway, right out of the 5 days out of a basic academy, right? So they're probably not bringing you anything that's anywhere related to if there's a real capable threat that attacks or that presents itself during your detail. They're not bringing that to you. They're bringing you stuff where your guys can go to the rest of the guys on your team. All right, when we pull up here, you stand here, you stand here, you go here. This is what we're going to say on the radio, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to move just like this. And this is how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All of the cookie cutter, clean cut stuff is
Yeah,
what you're going to get.
the 101
Scripted.
course.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
It's an introductory course. I don't even think it's 101.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the thing with that type of stuff too is I totally agree with you on what you're saying with that, Kevin. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of those types of courses, the biggest problem with it is not just going to the course and getting training, regardless of what it is, because we've been to some pretty high speed courses that we've sent multiple guys through over the years and absolutely would recommend it over and over again. But the problem is like, especially with like dignitary protection stuff, because during my law enforcement career, I went to a 5-day executive protection course for law enforcement type deal. But everything I did in that course, I never did again as a cop or a SWAT team member or any of that shit. Like, never did it again. Never trained it again. I saw it, so I know what it looks like in my head. So if I see people doing it, I know what they're doing, but I, it's nothing that I could never fill a spot. I mean, I could never, if somebody goes down and they're like, "Hey, jump in right here," I'd be like, what do I do? I haven't,
Right, right.
I
But
haven't
those are
trained this in 15 years, man. I don't know what I'm doing.
perishable skills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that becomes a problem with any training, I think, overall, when you're talking about it, whether it's EP training or any type of tactical training or anything like that, is you could go to a fantastic course, come back, and then never train it again, and then the flip side is it kind of goes double-sided here is you got the guys that go to the course, they come back and they're like, "This is the greatest course ever. We need to implement everything that this guy said." And you go, "Okay, what did he teach you?"
And how was it vetted?
And
Right.
now we have to vet those tactics, and do those tactics apply into the environment that we operate in?
Yep.
Or are they not? Like, you're not going to send a dude, especially like for us, we worked in a pretty urban environment. We're not going to send a guy to a course that's taught by like, a bunch of high speed, Rangers or SF dudes on open field movements
Right.
and ambush tactics and stuff, because, well, we don't do that shit. Like, so why would we take that as a tactic? And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of people get into trouble, is they start going to, these
Specialized.
super
Yeah.
specialized courses that
Yeah.
have nothing to do with what you do for your job.
Yeah.
There are guys out there like you guys that, if you guys came into our city and said, "Hey, guys, this is what we're doing. We're running a protective detail on this individual. We have known threats. What can you guys help out with?" And I could tell you from our standpoint and from the agency that we were at, we were like, "Okay, well, we'll give you every resource that we can, because we're not having anybody die in our city, and not on
Yep.
our watch. So we will give you every resource that we possibly can, um, to help out in that effort." Which I think is, when you start talking about the Charlie Kirk thing, it is one thing that really irritates me, is having been a resource, and our SWAT team been a resource for
Presidents.
presidents and congressmen and, whoever else.
Sure.
That was always our philosophy, was you come in and say, "Hey, we're doing this." And a lot of times it was Secret Service. And a lot of times, if it was a president, then they had a pretty significant presence and there wasn't a whole lot for us to do.
Yeah.
But we still set up tactically, like if the shit went really bad,
Oh,
we were going to be
absolutely.
ready for it. But then there were also times where they came in with like a 3 or 5 agent team to protect, somebody that's running for president. And then we had to fill in the gaps in that. And like Rick had talked about earlier, we did primarily like counter assault team stuff and those type of tasks, because
That's what we are. That's what we're
niche.
experienced.
We
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I think the
we're not going to have somebody come in and say, "Hey, we
right.
need you guys to run the protective detail for
That's not going to happen.
this congressperson." We're going to be like, how about no? How about you hire somebody that actually does that for a living, and we will help them, because
Yeah, and I think that
we're not those
some of that,
guys.
right. I think some of that with the landscape, and I think Kevin can talk about this a little bit. The landscape has changed drastically, especially using the law enforcement in a protection for some of these people that that will require the congressmen, things of that nature. I've told this to Kevin before, when I was a police officer, and you guys remember Trent Lott when he was
Mhm.
the majority leader. They're like, "Hey, Tracy, you've got protection experience. Hey, Trent Lott's coming into town. You're going to provide protection for him." And I go, "Okay, how many guys we got?" He goes, "Oh, it's just you." He goes, "Here, call this number. It says chief of staff." I call his number, right? Chief of staff answer. He goes, "Oh yeah, just meet him at the Moose Lodge. Meet him at the Moose Lodge." So I'm like, okay. He gives me the time, the location, and he's doing a speech at the Moose Lodge. I arrive at the Moose Lodge. He's already there because he decided to get there early and have drinks. That's how protection used to be with these guys.
Mhm.
My point is this: that landscape has changed drastically, and we know that. These guys are starting to get a lot of, especially if they're far left or far right, either direction,
They're
right?
loud.
They're getting some semblance of a active threat, and that's why they're starting to call on their local agencies, whether it's the sheriff's department that they're home based out of, or the city they're home based out of, and asking for police protection. So it would fall most probably on the cases that we've seen, on the ones that are a little bit more savvy, and I'm not trying to disparage others, but the SWAT guys are usually, a little bit, better trained, a little savvier, if you will. They've had access to different levels of training, so they get called upon to provide this protection. And we're saying it's a false sense of them saying, "Oh yeah, we can do that," because we went through the NTOA, National Tactical Officers Association, 2-day friggin' dignitary protection class, when you're going to get nothing in return out of 2 days.
Mm-mm.
You can't even get good repetitions on doing something.
Right.
You can't get enough information to ask questions out of 2 days, much
Right.
less answer questions.
Absolutely.
Well, but that comes back to what we talked about earlier, is there's that perception of safety, that perception of expertise, and again, it comes down to that no harm, no foul, right? When things go off well, it went well, everybody did a great job, and
Yeah.
we live to do it again, right?
Yeah.
It's not until you get the Charlie Kirk moments that you sit there and that's when that, oh shit, regret kicks in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
the,
use it.
the sad thing. Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Tom, I'm
Tracy.
sorry.
Oh, I was just to top that off. I was just gonna say that
Yes, sir.
when it comes to that aspect of using law enforcement and those types of roles and those people using law enforcement, and like Rick said, it's a perception of safety, because it's really
Sure.
what they're doing is safety through show of force. That's basically what it is. You
Yeah.
got a bunch of tacked up SWAT guys out there with slung ARs and whatnot, and the reality of it is you just have a bunch of dudes with weapons and tack vests that makes it look like you have proper security, and you probably don't.
Well, and to your point though,
It's
the
a false
problem
sense
with
of
that is
security. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
the problem to that is depending on like something like what you're talking about, Tracy, though, is you have that congressman, you have the senator, you have whoever, right? Comes in and you do that. They don't want a tacked up tack guy with them. They
No,
want you,
they don't.
they want you
Dressed down.
dressed down,
Mhm.
right? So
Yep.
you already have changed what we normally do, what our function normally is. You've already taken us out of our environment. So now
And
we've
you-
already created
Your
a
your
problem.
workspace looks totally different now.
Yeah.
Yes.
You took all the tools that we normally use away from us. And now we're like, shit.
Well, it truly
now all I
is
have
just
is
a perception.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so as you guys know, we have a kicking off our dignitary protection course in February down here in Florida, and I say that because we spent some time talking with some of the tag guys that are coming to the course, and they are, as Tracy was saying, they are currently tasked with some of the congressional members that are in their district. Again, it's probably worth still talking about, as Tracy said, the landscape and how much it's changed. And I mentioned previous when we started this thing, talking about, because we always talk about enemy TTPs, those tactics, techniques, and procedures. And depending on who we're talking about, if we're talking about that deranged person who stole his dad's AR from underneath the bed and he goes out to create havoc, that person and how you prepare for that type of person compared to a 3-man hit team from the cartels, that's a game changer. That changes everything. And again, we can look at it from the MAC-TAC part of it in law enforcement. We look at it from the EP portion, the dignitary protection, whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is we look at what that landscape looks like, to Tracy's point. We know the armory is here. We know the personnel are here. We know the training of these individuals, who they target and what triggers them to come after, that we don't know. We can only speculate. We can only prepare for it. And that's part of what we're trying to bring to it is You don't prepare for the least common denominator of what's going on or what's probably going to happen. You got to look at what's possibly going to happen, because it's very easy to scale down, very much harder to try to scale up.
Yes.
Right. We all know that in our worlds. A lot of when we spoke with some of the guys that are coming out that are doing the job right now, they're doing escort security. And again, I think, Tom, you were saying that it's more of a show of force. It's a deterrent, it's visual deterrent.
Mhm.
They see it, even if it's 2 or 3 guys that are dressed in plain clothes, but they look at them and you go, if you're anybody of normal aptitude, you look at him and go, ah, that guy's a cop. You know what I mean? You see it, no matter how he's dressed or how they present themselves, how they carry themselves. But they don't have the training that is particular for that environment that they're in at that point. Even if they did their 5-day Secret Service train up or whatever it was, and their only experience has been, hey, we're sitting, in a marked unit at an intersection, as the motorcade goes by, or we're the cat element sitting over here, which arguably you shouldn't be doing cat unless you know how protection works.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to know that when you respond, you got to know that who you're assisting, you got to know what they're doing, what their mindset is. And if you haven't gone through the training and know what the mindset is, then you're just flying by the seat of your pants. You go, hey, if something happens, we need you guys to counter assault whoever it is. If they sit down and they tell you all of their intel, I'm going down a different track on the counter assault thing. Sorry about that.
But these are all legitimate things. I mean,
because they're all working parts that work together.
Exactly.
Right. So let's say that you guys have been to the class and you work in full resources and you went for 5 days and we did it all Secret Service style or government style. And then you get on the detail, because every SWAT unit in the country says they do dignitary protection.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We all say we do high angle hostage rescue too, and we always train it, and we do it all the time.
Not me, because I hate heights.
Repelling and saving the damsel in distress on the 15th floor. Right, so we're always doing that. My point on that part is, if you went through that type of training and now you find yourself on a 2-man detail or a 3-man detail, and you haven't done anything in training that looks like that. The only thing you've done in training is 6 years ago, one of your teammates went through the Secret Service course, and he's been the one that's been, to everybody's point about the water down, taking it from the SME and then watering it down to the absolutely ends up being nothing useful. And then that's where you're getting your training from. And that is typically the law enforcement officers that we deal with that are on part of a dignitary protection team. That's their training. Now, nothing has happened thus far, so we haven't found the underbelly of their system, of how it works. And that's what we need to try to prevent, so we don't have the Charlie Kirk incidences on, a congressperson, while they're home because of, their political stance of what they're saying. Right. And they have escort security in DC, but when they come home with their most vulnerable, what do they have? They've gotten the old school, as Tracy said, they've got a cop showing up at the Moose Lodge, showing up there just to walk around and say, hey, I need a picture with Trent Lott.
Well, and that's the thing. So, as tragic as the Charlie Kirk thing was, right? And and there are a lot of things that we could sit and we could dissect all day, right? Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, this is not a beat up session. This isn't meant to kick anybody while they're down.
Not at all.
The issue that really comes out of this is it's a hot wash. I mean, here's the thing. We operate under that no harm, no foul, nothing ever changes, right? So this is how we think we're doing it right. So we continue until it goes wrong, right? And it went wrong. But this is an opportunity, and you guys have brought this forward, is now we take a hard look at what we've been doing, because there's no longer a no harm, no foul. We had a big harm, and there's a big foul, right? So now how do we address that? We ran into that same thing and I'll offshoot just a little bit. And I'm not going to go into detail on it, but we ran into that same thing in active shooter stuff with schools, right? When we went to Columbine, right? It's the whole how we responded to active.
Thought process changed
Yeah,
drastically.
everything
Yeah.
changed because we had that no harm, no foul up until Columbine, and then we had national outcry because we had a huge harm and a huge foul. Now we have to change our game. That's where we're at.
Yep.
And sadly though, and Kevin might want to touch on this. Sadly, some of the players in the industry, right, don't see it that way, right? That's part of the friction points that we've had on the talking points of saying, hey, what went wrong, and then whether it's Kevin, asking a legitimate question to someone in the business that has a training company, and then they block him and delete his post and delete mine when I said, hey, he was asking a legitimate question. Neither one of us were being snarky. I think the video came out and Kevin asked something to the effect of, because they were praising how well Harpole did in the
Yeah.
interview, the initial interview, and all this, and he was like, "Yeah, they don't make them like that anymore. That's a great, XYZ, and there's some
A lot
good
of
learning
lessons to
points,
learn.
and yeah, a lot of lessons to learn, learning points, and you know, we thought they did a bang up job." And Kevin was like, "All right, hey, please." Did we watch the same video or something to that effect? And
Yeah.
then the guy sends out a meme of the seven deadly sins, you
Mm.
know, and Kevin's like, yeah, I don't understand what that
That
means,
response. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I said, hey,
Glutton.
and then he responded with, hey, well, that's the problem right there. And then that's when I got blocked because I said, look, man, you're being intellectually dishonest. You know what he's talking about. He's not talking, he's asking you a direct question. What did you see that,
Yeah.
we didn't see? And then, of course, we got deleted and blocked. See, that's the problem in the industry is they want to, when something like this happens, if this guy is part of that certification or selection process or whatever
Circle the
process you want
wagons.
to call it, they circle the wagons instead
Mhm.
of actually addressing the problem. That's the problem at hand right now. It's twofold. The situation that happened and the fact that you're not addressing it and going, all right, there's some major mistakes that happened. They need to be addressed and they need to be rectified. And
Mhm.
if we're doing something that contributed to this, we need to look internally at our certification or our training process and fix it. But see, that's not going on.
Well,
Yeah.
but again, it's not an attack on an
No, not at all.
individual or an individual company. This is an industry thing, just like it is in, when we
Absolutely.
do this in law enforcement. And again, I go back to like what Columbine was for all of law enforcement. This was is we have to look internally inside ourselves and say, how do we change this? Because yeah, it
Absolutely.
happened in Littleton, Colorado, but let's just say in Buffalo, New York, it could happen again, right? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen? How do we as an industry fix this problem? And that's the mindset that people got to start getting into. It's not about kicking the guy while he's down. It's about fixing a gap that has now been identified.
Let's see the other side of that problem. And I hate to bring this up, and we're not beating anybody up like you said, but questions have to be asked. But if you're not willing to actually admit to some responsibility, it's very difficult for the industry to doggone recognize some of that too. You know what I
Yeah.
Mhm.
mean? When he doesn't take responsibility for the failure points and go and blaming others, even in the interview process, right? That's
Spending.
that's a problem in itself. Of course, we know that shows a little bit of I'm just going to say it. That shows some character issues. All right, I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to beat him up on a personal note, but when you start doggone, blaming other people for decisions that you either made or didn't make and should have made, and you're laying them off on somebody else, that you need to probably stop and take a
Yeah.
hard look at yourself. All right. So, obviously some of that was somewhat comical when they're talking about the vetting process, and then they all get tattoos or whatever. I mean, it almost sounds cult-like at that point when they're talking about it, but that's for another subject, possibly
Right.
when you guys come down to Florida for that course and hang
Mhm.
out with us. We could probably talk at the Red Robin, getting a burger or something, in relation to some of those thoughts. But
Well,
Yeah,
you
let,
you had me at Red Robin.
Robin.
like tag there a little bit on Tracy, and just reiterating that I understand the team going into self-preservation mode. I understand that part of it. I don't necessarily agree with them like Tracy. And look, if you know that you screwed up, you got to take a hard look and put it out there. The part that really bothers me is, even right now, over and over, I know I'm harping on this point about the counter sniper, is that there's still so many people that think that that was the issue. There was not a counter sniper up there. That's the only answer to prevent this from happening. And then when other people tagging along there with Tracy, the person, the individual he was talking about, he's saying all these things that he's talking about in this interview. This is what we teach in our course. And when I say it's a course, I don't mean it's a mom and pop course. I mean it's a highly nationally recognized course. And you're saying that you don't see anything wrong with it, and you're advocating that everything that was done and said is right on par with your belief. That's concerning, especially when you are just turning over all these individuals that you're establishing this mindset for them. They're coming out into the field as new executive protection people that are certified, and they're thinking the same way you're thinking, which is the only way that you could have. That they did absolutely nothing wrong. They did everything within their power with their resources, and the only way you could have prevented that, because I wouldn't have thought about it in 1,000 years, was you had to have a counter sniper up there. That's the part where you sit, Tracy and I sit back and we're going, if we can't keep this thing from derailing any farther than what it's doing, then this industry is done. Man, it's done. If any of these threats actually show up and start targeting individuals that have been deemed a target, it's going to be a bunch of ugliness that's going to be happening. Just like MacTac in the law enforcement world, it's going to be a whole lot of ugliness that's going to happen out there, because we've got blinders on. We have very myopic views, and nobody wants to have the discussion.
But to give an off ramp to the individuals that we're talking about, right? To give an off ramp to that mentality is, you can even give the op ramp of, you don't know what you don't know until you do, right?
Right.
And once
right.
you know it, change it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
that simple.
Yeah.
It's not a fault
Yep.
thing. It's an identification of a gap.
Mm-hmm.
But they have
That's
to
how
be
we all
willing.
grow, right?
They have to
Right.
be willing, right, to think outside the
See
box,
that.
for lack of a better term. Right now, they got to be able to say, "Hey, I'm willing to consider other options, or other points of view, or please tell me why you think they did so badly."
Well,
Well,
yeah,
besides the
I mean,
fact that their
the,
principal isn't alive anymore, we can
the,
go further than that.
the question is, and it's a fair question, is help me to understand why you say what you say. Help me to understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the conversation right there, right? Help
it
me
is.
to understand it.
Yeah.
And I'll help you to understand why I say what I say. But the other question, and I think this comes down to not just leadership, but I think it comes down to professionalism and professional accountability, is that always asking yourself, how did I contribute to what happened? Right? Or maybe it's not me. How did my
What happened? Yeah. And how
organization,
can we fix it?
how
Yeah.
did this industry, or how did our training contribute to what happened? And once we identify that, how do we fix it? We don't know what we don't know until we identify it. But once we do identify it, we have a responsibility to fix it.
Yeah.
Not
But
bury
you
our head in the sand and act like it didn't happen.
But I mean, you have people that that are on the board of directors of an association that say stuff like, "Well, if I was a team leader, it would have turned out the same way."
Yeah, if
Is
that
that
was
not
my
what he
team,
said, Kevin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, if that was my team, I can't say that it would have turned out any differently. A
So my
board of directors on a protection association. I mean,
so
and look, I can appreciate, we're trying to stay middle ground here. We're trying to,
yeah,
a little kumbaya. We're trying to get that thing going. Let's open up for discussion. But you really have some hard line. Why? I have no idea. And again, maybe it's the circling the wagon. Nobody likes to hear that the thing that they've been advocating, for the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years may not be the right
the end all
approach.
be all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially if you've collected, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees and in certifications. You know,
Well, think about this. Put it into a little historical perspective, and I think that it's kind of fun when we keep talking about circling the wagons, right? So you think that if Custer had realized that there were 2,000 Sioux waiting for him, you think he would have circled the wagons, or you think he would have thought, "Hey, maybe we need to do this differently"?
Yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of like Steven Seagal said, what's the essence of a man? So
that's right. Or I'm only a cook.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking maybe we should change our approach instead of doing the same approach and then circling the wagons because the end result's going to be the same. How about we just not do this?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
that's
some of
one way to
the
look at it.
that's some of the things that we've talked about. That one of the reasons that we're talking today are the fact that sometimes the industry is reluctant. We'll say it that way, reluctant to accept a different path, possibly, or something that's not on their current agenda for getting together, in conference calls or what have you. And I think that's where we're at. Look, all we're saying is, look, guys, think beyond what you think is normal and look beyond that for information. You should always be seeking out to be better. If you're still in the game, whatever that game is, whether it's SWAT, police, patrol, dignitary protection, soldier, whatever it
Teaching,
is, yeah,
training.
yeah, yeah. Always seek out to be better. You have to want. You still have, if you don't have the desire to be better, you probably need to go ahead and retire or do something else, right? Seek out to be better, whatever it is. And that's all we're saying. And without dialogue, you can't get better.
No,
You can't. The circle's too tight, just sitting in your house and being online or, whatever the case may be. You have to talk to other people in that perspective of business, whatever that business is. And that's all we're saying.
Mhm.
Have conversation, have dialogue.
And
Oh,
it
yeah.
makes perfect sense. So final thoughts on this, Tom?
Oh no, or even I was going to say, even at that, I mean, you got to look to expand your knowledge. I mean, the reality is like talking to you guys, like Rick has said, and I've said, like we're not protection guys, but expanding our knowledge by talking to you guys puts us in a different mindset on
yeah,
some of the stuff that we see and what we've done in the past as well.
There's changes
There's
in
always
perspective,
there's
and you're
always
always going to evolve.
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
You always got to be able to look back and go, okay, well, I really screwed the pooch on that, and I gotta change the way I'm doing things and
Right.
not.
And listening to you on this or listening to you on that, huh? Wow. That changes
Well,
my thought process on this a little bit. Maybe,
Hmm.
yeah, you know what? Maybe I should have turned left at Albuquerque. You know?
But you know what? That's part of and it being SWAT guys. What'd you do after a call? You guys all sat down and talked
We
it through,
Oh
a
yeah.
right? And they're
debrief,
like, "Oh man, I didn't
absolutely.
even." You'll go, "Oh Bob, I didn't see that, man. If I would have known that, I probably would have done this, or I would have moved here, or I would. That's actually part of growth,
Hmm.
right? Is actually talking through things because we don't. It goes. And I hate to say this in a segue portion, but it's kind of like everybody wants to solve a problem with a drone. All right.
Yeah.
Drones create some of their own problems.
Hmm.
That doesn't solve a lot in this aspect. It causes a multitude of situations, right? that maybe it goes into the false sense of security situation. Maybe it goes into, right, a drone can only cover a very specific area at a time, and it has time lapse. And then if it's not an actual operator that recognizes what the potential of a threat is, now it's got to go to somebody
Delayed.
else. Now you're filtering again through somebody else. So there's it's multi-layered. It's not just a put a drone in the air, which
Well,
everybody's trying to think
it's
that
a
that
tool
solves a lot.
and
Yeah.
you know, the proper tool for the proper job, right?
Yeah.
And you can't, if you have a tool for every job, then you're using the tool wrong.
Mm.
Okay. So, but
Yeah.
so that again, I think that this has been a great conversation. You know, when we, and you talked about it, when we do, you know, when we do an after action or a hot wash, whatever you want, you know, whatever you call them, right?
Right.
If you come out of an after action or a hot wash, right? And you've not identified a single problem,
If
then
that's
you
the
need to go
problem.
back, then you need to go
There's
back
the
in and
problem.
do
That
it
is the
again.
problem. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what they're for, you know, and that's what this is. This is really, this is just a big hot wash. Why are we making such a big, thick skin? So,
But
Yeah.
you
so
know what? You shouldn't have to have thick skin with if it's the truth, right? The
right.
truth is the truth. Yeah, you know, that's just the way it is. You know,
Well, but the
so
human nature is you got to have thick skin because you know what? If we don't make that a rule, then people come in with thin skin.
And they get buttered.
You
I know
know?
what you're saying.
yeah,
So you got
but
to have the rule.
they don't last long when
They
they do,
don't.
right?
They don't. But
So
that's
they
but
weed
then
themselves out.
but then the problem exists and we stall and exactly what's going on is
Months.
everybody spins their wheels. So if
Right.
we had if you guys had a parting message on this, so that we can put this out there, people can see your perspective, clear the air, so people can walk away saying, I get it now. What would it be?
Go ahead, Kev.
Um, I would say this, and sticking with the theme of how we're wrapping this thing up here, is that I know because we've been frustrated with this for so long, and mainly because we try to get answers. You know, we reach out, we put things out there, hoping to get some type of dissertation going, and it's all either falling on deaf ears or we just get deleted, right? So there's a little bit of frustration built up, but it's not to the point where, you know, we're sitting here going, hey, we're not willing to learn. You know, we're not coming across that way. I really want to know. I want to know why people think the way they think, why they make the decisions they make. Because I may be, and Tracy, we may be missing something.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be so far off a base, assuming something that we shouldn't. If the majority of people, and this may come across as snarky, but I really don't mean it that way right now, is that if we actually hear something from someone and they're trying to explain it to us, and we have that aha moment, you know, where we're saying, that makes sense. You know, that makes sense. However, I see what you're saying. I probably wouldn't have done it that way, but that's the conversation where it gets opened up. But for us to keep hearing from a lot of people a 180 thought pattern of what we have, we really want to make sure that we're not missing something.
Yeah. So you're seeking somebody to
Yeah,
help
because
you understand why they say what they say.
I don't want to keep hammering that nail if it's already starting to bend. And my whole concept is I just got to get the nail on the board. You know, if I need to straighten that nail up and march on from there, then let's do it. But we really just can't get any information about it. And Tracy said it earlier about now all the conspiracy theory stuff is coming out because that's more fun. It's more fun to talk about. And we're losing the gist of how did this happen at ground level? You know, what could have been improved upon? You know, that hot wash, it's a wash because anything that's dirty and screwed up, we're going to actually flush it out. That's why we're going to do it. But we don't see anything that resembles a hot wash. And that's my parting shot there is this, you know, don't take us as coming in as just one-sided and us saying, hey, it should have been this way and no other way. Man, we're willing to learn. We want to learn. We want to find out what's going on because we don't want to be off base.
That's cool. That's fair. Tracy.
No, I was going to say we're looking for, you know, dialogue. Look, we have we have information that we want to share, experience and knowledge, and we want others to do the same. That's all we're asking for. Um, we don't want this to come across any other way than, hey, there some of the things that transpired need to be addressed. They can't be kicked down the road, right? They have to be addressed. And that's what all we're saying is let's address these and fix the problems going forward. And one life lost is one too many, right?
Mhm.
Um, so we want to whatever it takes to resolve or solve or get, get on a smooth, level of thought process that protects everybody, truly protects, not a facade, right? That truly protects people and not give them a false sense when they walk away with a certificate. That's what we want to do. I don't want somebody going thinking that, hey, they're going to go to this course, wherever that course is, or organization, and think that they're ready to do business, right? That is a one and done type deal. That is not life. We, we want you to seek out, hey, don't, if you come to our course or you come and get information from us, we want you to go to other courses, right? Because you have to be well rounded. If you
Mhm.
only drink from the same well, you don't know what all the other things taste like. We want you to get out there and be active mentally, right? And start looking at all this and dissecting, hey, why would I make that decision? Why is that decision being made? Or how can I make a decision that would prevent that from happening? Whatever the question might be, that's what you should be doing. Just like when you were police officers and you guys know this. Hey, if this happens, my mind is busy. If this happens, I already know I'm going to react here. If I'm at this red light, hey, can I make it past this car if I start getting somebody active against me sitting in my patrol car at this red light? How am I going to egress? Right? Can I make it there? Oh, I can't make it there. There's a fire hydrant, right? I'm busy all the time. Well, that's what we're telling you about this business. We need to start looking at this business the same way we look at being on patrol or the same way we're being SWAT officers. We need to start dissecting things at a rudimentary level and trying to solve them, not wait until they happen. Or I will say this, don't think that a simple problem and talk about it on the social media that it's something bigger than it is, because then people start thinking differently about how you solve the problem. Does that make sense? Don't
Yeah.
embellish something and make it more than it is, like running a roadblock in a permissive environment and thinking that you have been tested with your client, because that is not so. And sometimes when we tell a story long enough, human nature, we start believing ourselves, right? So, um, with that said, when we start believing ourselves in those aspects and we start telling stories and other people learn from what listening to people through tenure, right? Even though tenure's not experience, right? We start going, oh, well, I've never done that, but friggin', Billy Bob told me he did that and this is how he did it. Now that person, because they trusted you, is under a false sense of rectifying the problem. And we
Mhm.
see a lot of that also. And I don't know if that makes sense. I know I've doggone, you know, kind of circled the drain a little bit with saying this: seek out knowledge wherever it is. It's all knowledge. Good and bad is knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Knowing what to get rid of, right? Because our brains are just like computers. Knowing how many files to save, right? And how many to delete is directly up to you as an individual and what you believe to be important to you. And we're just saying, seek out information, get out there, do your thing, right? That's all we're saying.
Perfect. Tom?
Um, I think the interesting thing is with you guys, trying to start these conversations with other people in the industry and whatnot that are um, you know, not willing to talk with you and that type of thing, especially on this particular subject with Charlie Kirk's assassination. I think it's kind of ironic, especially since that was kind of his whole theme was starting those conversations, and now you got these people that don't want to have those conversations, that it's something that was, that he adamantly stood for. And now you have these guys that don't want to have
Yeah, I didn't even
conversations
think
about
about
it.
it that way.
So,
That's
so whole
interesting.
prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's my thought process. Prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong. Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
So I find that interesting anyway. So, but that's all I got.
All right, guys, there you have it. My final comments are pretty simple. You know, keep learning. Every day should be a learning moment. If you're no longer learning, then you're done. You know, get out of the game.
Right on.
And we
All right.
appreciate you guys' time once again. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anytime.
All
We
right,
always
guys.
enjoy it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your
Well,
time.
welcome. Come back. We'll have some more conversations. Love these conversations. Folks, that's our episode. Hope you enjoyed it. You can find it on YouTube at our site and on LinkedIn. We'll be sending out the link. Hope you join in. It's a great conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it. Everybody have a great new year.
See ya.
All right.